I am here today with Stacey Heale. Stacey is a curator. She is a teacher in the university. She's also a beautiful writer, and she wrote a book I love called Now is Not the Time for Flowers. And Stacey, who was your husband when you met?
Oh my God, what a question. My husband, Greg, was a very beautiful, like elfin man. It's really hard to describe. He had bleach blonde, messy hair, and he had this voice. Oh, this voice that was like, that kind of could switch from being this really falsetto little elf and then would be really growly the next. And he was so funny. I knew of him, and I knew that he was someone who was the polar opposite to me. I was the good time girl who was always out, always had packed my toothbrush in my bag, possibly whizzed through town on the way back the next morning to go and buy some underwear. Underwear for the day. And he was someone who was very much into his own company. He wanted to sit and read Proust. There was a really great picture of him backstage at Top of the Pops. Do you know what talking? Do you know Top of the Pops?
Explain it, so I've heard of it.
Oh, Top of the Pops was a legendary TV show that was live music. So every week it would be who's in the charts. It was this big, big deal. And he was on Top of the Pops a couple of times. Oh, he can, with his band, Delays. There is a picture of him backstage in the green room. He's got big headphones on, and he sat in a corner reading a book called 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die. And I saw that, was like, who's there? Who's on the show with you? Who? He was like, oh, I don't remember. I'm like, that is who you are. In a nutshell, you're on Top of the Pops and you're reading a book. I don't understand. But yeah, that is.
I love it.
That's, wow. It's interesting, isn't it? When someone dies, it is interesting to think that I can say to you, oh, that's who he was. But that's who he was in this tiny corner of that day.
Yeah.
Actually, he was a billion things.
Yeah.
He was loads of things that I knew, and he was loads of things that I didn't know at all. Because even the person you're closest to doesn't know all of the sides of you, because you're different. You're bringing different things, different colours and textures to different people.
Yes.
And I like that. I like that we don't get to know all the different sides of each other.
Kind of reminds me of the definition of nostalgia is an unaltered past, like a brighter past, like a past that pulls us back always. And, you know, just as a historian, we always have to like war against nostalgia of any kind. But like the sweetness of love, like when we love someone where we can't access new parts of them.
Yeah.
I imagine that the temptation to freeze somebody in time is really strong.
I try really actively to not do that, and even still, I can feel myself doing it. Because as time goes on, and you just don't have that presence of someone right next to you, kind of fizzing with their atoms and saying new things and bringing new things into the world, into the conversation, you have what's left. And so then you're starting to kind of piece things together with the finality of all of the different things that you have, a beginning and an end. But actually that's not all of the pieces, because they're just my pieces of that person.
I guess I tried to do that with like I wrote a memoir when I really thought it was my last year to live. And when I looked back on it, I felt kind of sad that I wasn't even still the person I was when I wrote that book.
Did you feel that at the end after you finished writing it?
I guess I was so grateful to have written it that I felt the gift of it so intensely. that I just thought, like, man, good for me. I wrote that mostly in the hospital. Like, good for me.
Wow, yeah,
Yeah.
well done.
But then after, almost immediately, I don't know, you just keep living. And then you look back on what you've just done and you realize, oh no, that's a time capsule.
Absolutely. Do you know, a lot of people said to me when I was talking about writing a book, they said, do you think that this is the right thing to do? Because you're going to be writing from the wound and not the scar. And the wound is too visceral, and actually maybe there'll be emotions there that might be difficult to write about. Maybe anger, rage, jealousy, like or emotions that come up when you're kind of in the thick of it. I was really interested by that.
I hate that.
That people said that is very
nice.
Me too, because I was like, this is what I needed. I don't need the rose-tinted version from 10 years away, looking back through binoculars into the past when everything subsided and you can't really, you have solidified. It's calcified. These stories start to get edges over time. And even though I try really actively to not do that, I can feel it.
Yeah.
I can feel it happening around me, and even in the stories that I tell my children even.
And maybe I would scar differently if I had a chance to let it heal differently.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, it's a bit like when if you break a bone and it sets in the wrong place, and then you kind of carry on regardless, it sets in and then you're forever with this bone that's set out of joint. And so I ignored all of that. Ignored it and just thought, but this is the real stuff. And I thought that when people said that to me, that's got nothing to do with me. That's got something to do with you. Because actually, and that's why we don't talk about all this stuff, because it's too uncomfortable. It's too visceral, and it's so much easier when we can talk from the scar. I read something recently about talking about mental health, and about talking about how mental health is a lot more acceptable, that people talk about it more openly, but only in the terms of it being in the past. Of saying when my mental health was bad, not as in I'm currently in a real crisis.
Yeah.
That's still not okay. Yeah. So I think we like a 10-mile view of anything difficult.
Yes. You have a well, there's no such thing as soulmates. Tell me about this wonderful, I think, fabulously countercultural view on finding somebody and falling in love, and then declaring that they're not your soulmate.
Yeah, it was something that I think happened over time. I think I did believe in soulmates when I was younger, because I think I was this dreamy, romantic, idealistic child.
Mm.
And I think every relationship I had as a teenager and then a young woman, I think that got crushed out of me. Just through some really horrible things, and also just some very mundane, normal relationship things.
Yeah.
To the point where I think I met Greg when I was 26, and I think I had that conversation with him maybe in my early 30s. Or no, that's not true. No, mid-30s. And I thought there was something still so romantic about the idea of saying, I don't believe in soulmates, but I believe in this, that the idea that we are somehow ordained.
I didn't have to choose you. I'm choosing you now.
Yeah, it just felt like the most unromantic version of love, to say there is one person. You just need to be very hopeful that you live in the same country or just part of the world. Hopefully you're not 70 years older, because that's weird.
Well, that's actually the movie Twilight. Look, I'm going to solve this for you.
Do you know what? I'm so thrilled you've said that. That's why we're friends, because I was thinking
Edward was much older than Bella.
And also, it's a bit like when Jacob is in love with their newborn child. That's his soulmate, a newborn baby. Exactly.
Yes, it was.
This is a PhD waiting to happen. The dissection of love and soulmates through modern film.
Great films.
Great films. So, Soulmates, I just thought was just a nonsense and the least romantic thing I could think of how people end up in love. And I think it's really, it's a trap. I feel like it's a trap in that it keeps you hooked to an idea. And also, if people are addicted to you, it's this noose around your neck, which is, but you are my soulmate. And it's, I think that's very complicated. It's very complicated.
It's like announcing that you've already been spiritually married, and you're like, I don't remember going through that ceremony.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it made me think about other past relationships. We are not in a culture that you get together with someone when you're 18 and then you get married.
Yeah.
And then that's it. You might have different relationships. And I find it really difficult to think about that all of those had not much to offer in that sense. It feels confusing, because then I was thinking you'd have to decide who your soulmate was, surely on the last day of your life, because, as I said to Greg on that day, the fateful day about soulmates, I was saying, what if your soulmate leaves you and says, I don't love you anymore, or I'm in love with someone else, or what if they die? Does that mean that that's that then? For the person who's still living, that's your quota of love. And bizarrely, very bizarrely, it was 2 or 3 days later that Greg was told he had incurable cancer and that he was going to die. It was so weird. So weird.
He had been... Was he just like a naturally anxious person before? Or what was the relationship he had between worrying about being sick and being actually sick?
Yeah, he worried a lot about being sick. He had OCD that he talked about very publicly as well. When he was interviewed with his band, he wrote songs about it even.
And for people who don't know I'm sure OCD looks like many things, but what would that look like?
Yeah, OCD, I think, has a really strong branding of being all about cleanliness and order. So people think it's about washing your hands 100 times a day, or making sure that all your cans line up neatly in a cupboard. But the side of OCD that people don't know about is intrusive thoughts. And I don't mean intrusive thoughts like, you might go to bed and you might think about, oh God, I think I might have been rude to my boss today. And that plays over in your head. I don't mean that. I mean a never-ending, constant reel of voices telling you things like, you are a murderer. That's not something that Greg felt, but these are the kind of things that people think, that you could be on a train station and be thinking, I could kill everybody here. I could run along and I could push everybody in front of a train on the tracks. And one of the ways that these intrusive thoughts work with OCD is to believe that there is something terminally wrong with you. And weirdly, he picked the wrong one in that he had convinced himself that he had AIDS. And it is a very, very common thing for people with OCD to believe, because it's extreme. There's something I read about OCD that said thinking that you have AIDS and thinking that you are a paedophile are the Lennon and McCartney of OCD, which I thought was the most unbelievable but true thing. And this is how people, this is how it manifests in people. Again, and it's so shameful that people don't ever want to talk about it. And unfortunately for Greg, the thing that he was afraid of was not the thing that was inside him, slowly killing him.
Yeah. Unlike things you can't talk about, you had to kind of take on not talking about it, sounds like, as part of your role as evolving caretaker. Some people enter into illness with like, I'm going to learn every single thing I can. I'm going to be an expert. I was like that. But a lot of other people have they want a barrier between them and all of the information. And it sounds like you had to embody that barrier.
I think I realised quite quickly that there is a huge divide across the board with everybody. People seem to sit in one camp or the other. There doesn't seem to be much grey area with this. People want to absorb the internet in terms of like learning to be an oncologist. I felt that I was studying for some kind of doctorate in oncology because I wanted to learn how to cure cancer, basically. And I think that extremity really butted up hard against Greg's real need to not know anything about it. And I don't mean that in a one was right, one was wrong. I think that I found it very difficult, but I never thought I was right. Do you know what I mean?
That's also very loving. I mean, there's so much compassion when you can like toggle your brain between somebody else's worldview, though.
I hear what you're saying, but I feel like I don't. But I was also angry.
Yeah.
I think you can be multiple things all at once, and I think I could understand why you would not want to know anything about such a revolting truth about your own life, especially because we had 2 babies, and I think the truth of it was so outrageous.
That makes sense. When I thought about my son, I would always think about the phrase like, those are my impossible thoughts. So when you say like there's a version that doesn't require compassion, where you're just like, no, there's a no in it.
Yeah.
That's the like, there's like a kickback to love, you know? That sounds like the real kickback. Where absolutely not.
Yeah. And I think when you're the person who's ill, there's almost like this ripple effect of people from outside. So right outside is like your spouse or your children, and then outside of that is your immediate family, then extended family, then friends, colleagues, well-wishers. And I think everyone has to hold up the people on the inside of their sphere. And I think the person who's ill is just thinking about themselves, and that is exactly how it needs to be. But I think everyone else who's kind of like holding the pressure up from outside, that can be really complicated. I think it was also really complicated because he was my partner. Say if one of my children was ill, I think it would be a different situation. And I imagine the dynamic would be different again if it was on my parents. So I've not been in either of those situations, but I think when someone's supposed to be on an even playing field as you, and things, the balance starts to tip in lots of different ways, the equilibrium becomes confused. And while there is that love, that instinct to protect, and I had this instinct in me to think that I could shield him from everything. If I couldn't cure cancer, which I truly believed I could at the beginning, if I couldn't do that, at least I could protect him from the truth of what was happening, or what was coming. And I think I was naive about what level of collateral damage that would do.
Oh.
I think in terms of both me personally and also between us.
Yes. Is the first casualty just an immediate loneliness? Then I remember feeling like there was a separation right away, and it was just plexiglass, and everybody was on one side.
I think Greg felt like that. I think that's very usual. I think to suddenly feel so othered, really different. I talked in my book about how I saw people act towards him, and that it looked like how people act towards dolphins. If they go and see dolphins swim, it's this kind of like delight at seeing someone, as in like, oh my God, here's like the almost dead man. Here's this, and this kind of joy of like being in the presence of that person. And there's also this hint of pity, which is, oh my God, you're behind that glass. You're the dolphin that can't get out.
There's exactly. There's the accidental tiny slight arrogance of the "it's not me."
Oh yeah, thank fuck it's not me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I saw that again and again with how people treated Greg, and I don't know if loneliness was actually my first feeling. I think it was a split. I felt like in one camp I had to be the perennial cheerleader, and I had to be a doctor, and I had to be constantly positive, constantly use certain words. And then on the other side, I'm talking about how I'm going to survive as a solo parent. I'm talking to people about money and my house and what I'm going to do.
Yes.
And I just feel like I'm split down the middle and having these different conversations with different people.
Yeah. And the future, that oneself planning, organizing, probably being honest, like being the reporter, I guess. And then the invulnerable and needless. I guess the sucky part is just that both versions have no needs.
Yeah. I think I didn't let myself think about that person. Every now and again, I would let myself break a little bit. Sometimes when I was with my mum, I think I let myself almost be the little girl and be looked after. And it's so guttural. It would be things like I wanted to go to bed and I wanted my mum to come and sit next to me and hold my hand or stroke my hair and just let me fall asleep in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Or sit on her sofa with a blanket over me and her bring me a sandwich while I watched some trashy TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to not be the adult.
Right.
I just didn't want like the responsibility of having two children who still needed to get up and have breakfast, go to school, deal with all the kind of the normal things of having children.
Yeah.
And then deal with the kind of life or death things at a hospital. It was so confusing of having babies that's all about the beginning of life and then being in these meetings where it's all about the end of life. And again, it was that split in me of truth, denial, life, death. and having to play these roles very often in the same hour.
Yeah.
And I think I'm still reeling from that, actually, like 2.5 years later.
We get a lot of like lovely people who go through really difficult times at the Everything Happens project, and they'll let us know about their experiences. And some of the people who write in who've had, especially like the suffering person who really didn't want to be the one who did any of the reporting or any of the telling, and then in that way any of the parenting around the truth of their illness. And then they find that like the endless, even just like worrying about how they're supposed to be future managing that stuff. Like, how's a future self going to even know what impact it's going to have? But it sounds like that split self is this, like, it splits down you, and then it splits down the whole family.
Yeah. It's hard to know, because again, it's that thing of people don't talk about it. So I wonder how different families deal with the same thing. I remember when Greg was really towards the end of his life and he was in a hospice, I remember sitting in the family area, kind of just in stunned silence, really. And there was a family next to me, and they were Googling, what does the death rattle sound like? And playing it. And I thought to myself, you guys are very slow on the uptake. I've already done that. And I was like, wow, are we all just doing the same things in our own private hells in these moments? And
oh my gosh, that's such a good description, Stacey. Are we all just stuck in our house, Googling the worst of not our imagination, of our anticipation of this path we're supposed to walk down that we're not even sure how to even imagine what we're supposed to be scared of? When you were describing, like, well, I thought the worst day of my life, like, I thought every worst thing wasn't even necessarily the worst thing. Like,
oh yeah. Well, it's a bit like your best day is probably not your best day, or what you think it is when people talk about their wedding day. My best day is probably, if I think back to it, maybe like a Tuesday after school with my best friends when I was 16, when we would go back to a friend's house and do dance routines and and tape ourselves to making stupid songs. That's possibly my best day, maybe. Or maybe I haven't even had it, but it's the same about worst days. You wonder what.
yeah.
Oh, well, this is it. This has to be the worst day. And then it's not. If I think about my worst days, it has been that just an arbitrary evening, probably like alone with my girls after Greg died, when everyone's gone back to their lives, which they absolutely needed to. That's what happens. But it means then you're left at the epicenter on your own. And I was left with 2 children who were both losing their minds, whilst I'm also losing my mind, and really not knowing how to deal with it. Those are my real worst moments. And I think when I think about real grief, it wasn't necessarily, say, at Greg's funeral even. It might be when I burst into tears at a supermarket when I saw the noodles that he liked, that I'd bought every week for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And now I never liked them, so I'm never buying them again. And like the punch of that, of like, wow, that's the end.
Yes.
Like, that almost hits harder because you're not expecting it. Those little tiny, innocuous moments.
Yes.
That might be the very worst moments of your life.
Yeah. Stacey, if we could rescue anybody from the worst parts of their private hell, Is there any, like, I know you and I are so anti-aphorism and anti-advice and anti-maxim. I know we only believe in a couple little things. And that is always how I know that I have my people. Yeah. Like, there's a precision to your language too, where you won't say things that aren't true. And like, which is bumper cars, which is how I know you're telling me the truth, which is so lovely to listen to. But there's only a couple precious true bits of advice we can tell people. I wonder what things you would tell people if they were, that would spare them a little.
Things change. Things change. And again, and again, and again, and again, forever. Forever and ever. Way after we're gone, I think hope is tricky if you have been in the cancer world. Because I think it can take a turn down a side street of denial. And maybe that could be to do with the position I held, in that if you are the person who's going to be left, then hope is possibly a luxury you can't afford.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on what you mean by hope, I suppose.
Totally.
But I think that there is hope in change. And to know when you are on those rocky seas that feel so unbearable, literally unbearable, to even breathe into another second, that it will change. And you just have to hold on to that life raft of change to know that you will sail out of that. But on the flip side, to remember as well, when you're in those happy sitting with the flowers times, this changes. That you don't get, there isn't some destination that you get to where everything is fine. That actually this change, if you see it in a certain way, that energy is what can keep you afloat in both the good and the bad times. And depending on what that looks like, you can either just hold on tight or sunbathe on it.
Yeah. Do you feel like in the aftermath of the aftermath of the aftermath, which is just how the life goes, that you've managed to reassemble the feeling of the two halfness of the split self? Do you feel like kind of one person again?
Yeah, I think so. I think that that is a time thing. It is a time thing because it needs time, a bit like a scar, a wound and a scar. It needs that time to knit back together. And I think the scar will always be there because it is such a dramatic thing to go through. But it's not an open wound in me, which I most certainly felt.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know anyone who believes in love more than the people who've been hurt and changed by it.
Yeah, that's true. I remember when we were told that Greg would die. I remember the most unbelievable feeling that it almost felt everything inside me. It was everything cleared, and I just had this understanding of love, of none of this shit matters. We have created these stupid problems and these ridiculous things to focus on. And while we're doing all of that, this thing over here, that's all that matters, which is love and people, the people that we love. That's all that matters. And it was the clearest understanding. And it's weird though, because time does make things fuzzy. And even now, earlier today, getting stressed about life admin for passports for my children, going bananas about the stuff that's in my house, all the rubbish I've got in all the clothes I've got, the shoes. And it's this kind of man-made world that I've created So it doesn't, just because I've seen that,
Yeah.
I've seen this other side of life, doesn't mean that I don't get drawn back in by the nonsense of it all.
I do think that to myself sometimes where I'm like, I think I used to be a better person. When I was the sicker, it's possible. I was really clear on it. Good stuff.
Yeah, I read something once that talked about widows in certain cultures are seen as these spiritual leaders, that they walk someone up to the gates of heaven, and so they're as close to death as anybody can be without dying, and then they have to walk back, and so that there's a time period after their partner dies, because they have been so close to the end or wherever, that they still have the glow about them. So they are seen to go to them as a spiritual leader for advice, and they can heal people. And I think I felt that.
Yeah.
I felt quite untouchable. And I miss that. I miss that about early grief, where you feel nothing can hurt me because of where you have literally just been. And then I felt it fade. Did you feel that fade?
When you said the glow, I was like, oh yeah. I thought of like bright clarity. Yeah, and it was just Technicolor, and it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I became a garbage person. Like you hear the first time I was gossiping about faculty members.
Yeah.
And someone was telling me about their research, and I didn't care. Yeah. Not like a existential didn't care. I was like, I don't care about you. No. Okay, wait a minute. I do care about you. I'm just being a bad person. Oh, wait, I'm a bad person again.
I was thinking that about screenshotting pictures of dresses at the Met Gala sent to me from like the pit of my bed, me kind of in like dirty stained pajamas. Hate him. Hate him. Yeah. That's who I am at my core.
Well, whether it's being someone who also cherishes the inner workings of the movie Twilight, to the person who really does have a glow about them, my dear, it's a joy. It's a joy to know you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Kate. Right back at you.